Today on Capetri's Corner, we're going to work on completing the square. Now, completing the square is a method used to solve a quadratic equation. Here's our formula here, which I think is a little overwhelming at first until you practice a couple. So let's look at number 1. It's a quadratic because it has x to the second power is the highest power that we have. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want to get this constant to the other side. So I'm going to add 11 to both sides. I only want my x's on the left-hand side. So I have x squared plus 10x. Now I'm going to leave a blank here because I'm going to put something there in just a minute, is equal to 11. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take half of 10, which is 5. So I'm going to take half of 10, which is 5. And then I'm going to square 5, which is 25. So I'm going to add 25 to this side. Whatever I do to one side of the equation, I have to do the other side to keep it balanced, plus 25 to the other side. So what I did here is I just created a perfect square trinomial. So this really is x plus 5 squared. On the other side, I get 36. Now, what I need to do here is just get x by itself. So now is something that is hopefully comfortable with you. I need to take the square root of both sides. So I have x plus 5. Now remember, whenever we take the square root of both sides, I need to have a plus or minus. Square root of 36 is 6. I'm going to bring 5 to the other side. So I have x is equal to negative 5 plus or minus 6. Now we could split this, right? So we have x is equal to negative 5 plus 6. X is equal to negative 5 minus 6. So I have x is equal to 1 and x is equal to negative 11. That's the process of completing the square. Now, we started basic on that one, but let's look at this one. If I factor and solve. So I'm going to take the same equation and I'm going to factor it, right? As we've done in the past. Everything's set equal to 0. I have opposite signs, so I have an x plus and an x minus. Factors of 11 would be 11 and 1. The 11 is going to be attached to the plus. So if I were to solve that, I would get the same values. So with this particular problem, because it's factorable, we would not really use completing the square. It will work, but you can see the process is a lot longer. I just use this easy one to start with, just so you're comfortable with the process of it. All right, let's look at number 2. Okay, so again, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that constant to the other side. So I'm going to add 9 to both sides. So I have x squared plus 16x, I'm going to leave a little spot, is equal to 9. Okay, so half of 16 is 8, right? And then 8 squared is equal to 64. So that's what I'm going to add to both sides. 64 here, 64 here. So again, what I did was I created a perfect square trinomial. So I have x plus 8 squared is equal to 73. Okay, now I'm going to keep the process, take the square root of both sides. X plus 8 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 73. Now, 73 is not a perfect square. It does not have a perfect square that goes into it, so I can't simplify that anymore. So my answer here is x is equal to negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 73, and that's my final answer. So this one would not be factorable, so you would use completing the square. All right, so let's move on to the next one. So again, I'm going to bring 25 to the other side. I have x squared plus 10x, leave a little space there, is equal to negative 18. Okay, I'm going to take half of 10, which is 5, square it, and I get 25. So I'm going to add 25 to both sides. So I have x plus 5, quantity squared, is equal to 7. Again, take the square root of both sides. X, remember my plus or minus, so x plus 5 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 7. So x equals negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 7. All right, moving on to our next problem. Again, the same thing. I'm going to bring 22 to the other side. And I have x squared plus 8x is equal to negative 22. I'm going to take half of 8, which is 4. 4 squared is 16, add 16 to both sides. From there, again, I have x plus 4, quantity squared, is equal to -6. And this is the first time we've had -6 as an answer on the right-hand side once we add in. So I have the square root of both sides. So I have x plus 4 is equal to plus or minus the square root of -6. Now we're going to get an imaginary number here, right? So I have x is equal to -4 plus or minus. This is going to be I root 6 because 6 is not a perfect square and does not have a perfect square that goes into it. Okay, moving on to our next one. Again, the same thing here. I'm going to bring 9 to the other side. And I have x squared minus 6x is equal to 11. Oh, made that a little bit too close. So let's give me a little bit more room. Okay, so half of -6 is 3. 3 squared is going to be 9. So I'm going to add 9 to both sides. So this number right here is always going to be positive. So that gives me x this time minus 3 squared, because that's a minus, is equal to 20. Square root of both sides. So I have x minus 3 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 20. Now the square root of 20, remember, is the square root of 4 and the square root of 5. So I have x minus 3 is equal to plus or minus, that's 2 root 5. Add 3 to both sides, and I have x is equal to 3 plus or minus 2 root 5. Okay, this one's a little different. I need to get a perfect square trinomial. So I need to get rid of that 2. So I'm going to divide everything by 2. So I'm left with x squared minus 7 over 2x plus 5 over 2 is equal to 0. Okay, so when I do that, I have to bring that 5 over 2 to the other side. So I have x squared minus 7 over 2 is equal to -5 over 2. Okay, so this fraction right here, it makes things a little tricky. So I have -7 over 2. When I divide that by 2, I end up with -7 over 4. Okay, when I take -7 over 4 and I square it, I get 49 over 16. So I'm going to add 49 over 16 to both sides. So what do I have here? So now I have x minus 7 over 4 squared is equal to, this gives me 9 over 16. Once I use my calculator for that, I'll use my calculator when I add those two. Now the process is the same. Again, the process is the same all the time. It just makes it a little bit harder with fractions. So I'm going to take the square root of both sides. I have x minus 7 over 4 is equal to plus or minus 3/4. I'm going to add 7 over 4 to both sides. So I have x is equal to, I have 7 over 4 plus or minus 3 over 4. So that gives me, let's bring this over here. I have 7 over 4 plus 3 over 4, and I have 7 over 4 minus 3 over 4. So this gives me 10 over 4, which is 5 over 2. So the x is equal to 5 over 2. Same thing here. This gives me 4 over 4, which is 1. So x is equal to 1. Okay, so that's it with completing the square. Great job today. Have a good one.